Blessed to be a part of your day. KIDO Talk Radio. Kevin Miller in the morning. Let's go out to Cassie Smedley joining us from the RNC. Cassie, good morning.
Good morning, Kevin. Great to be with you.
Good to have you with us here. So we take a look at the week ahead when we're looking at Congress. They're out for a couple weeks. Does that mean no harm, no foul, or what should we be looking out for, ma'am?
Well, I think the Dem 2020 candidates we saw yesterday was a busy day on the campaign trail, and that's because most of them have their day jobs in Congress. So they're out really ramping up their campaign appearances during these what should otherwise be constituent work weeks. But that aside, I think we still have some good things going, of course, with President Trump, who doesn't ever seem to really take a day off. And, Kevin, I don't know if you saw, did you see the recent CNN poll that says that a record 71% of Americans feel really great about how our economy is doing right now? So things are chugging along.
They are, Cassie. As you well know, you go toe-to-toe with the media all the time. We get the alternative news, the bizarro news, the fake news that everything is horrible.
Right, and it's interesting because I didn't see what came after the segment when CNN announced their poll, but I have a feeling that had something to do with how bad Donald Trump is doing as our president, despite the fact that they just had this poll that said people are feeling really good. And it's interesting when you juxtapose what people are saying, how they're feeling, and then you go tune in to what any one of the dozens of Democrat 2020 contenders are saying on the trail. And you would also think that things aren't going well in our country. It's so out of step and out of touch with how people are feeling. And when you've got President Trump, who for the past 2 years has worked to roll back the Obama-Biden administration's government overreach and get government out of our lives and saying, I'm okay with good government, but let's get rid of these deregulations and let's get rid of all of these tax increases. Let's cut your taxes, give you more of your money. And people are saying, I like that. I feel empowered to go out and get it done for myself. And then you go listen to Beto or Elizabeth Warren or Gillibrand, and every single proposal they bring up is, how can I get more government back into our lives? I think that's going to be a very tough argument in 2020, but I'm confident President Trump's very excited to have that debate.
Yeah, see, let me hit you with something Matthew Dowd said on This Week, which was very odd. And I'm so glad that they had Chris Christie on and another Republican activist, Republican consultant on, because Matthew Dowd, I didn't know he worked for Lloyd Bentsen, and then he worked for George W. Bush, but very progressive in his thoughts, very critical of the president when he said, actually, the Democrats, and I'm saying this with a straight face, so I'm teeing it up for you, the Democrats are actually reflecting the views of Americans as opposed to the Republicans. Like, they're more moderate. They're moving to the middle. Like, socialism is mainstream.
I mean, what world is he living in? And I have to tell you, Matthew Dowd used to be a voice that you could listen to, and now he just seems to be all in on not just the Democrat team, but I would get to that comment right there, the far left progressive party, because it's really out of step with the Republican Party, certainly. I don't know why he gets to still parade around as a Republican, but that said, it feels like 2016 all over again, doesn't it? You've got these Democrats that are saying $93 trillion Green New Deal and government takeover of your health care and get rid of the Electoral College, as Elizabeth Warren said last night, which seems to be a pretty mainstream thought in the Democrat Party today. And it's like, wait a minute, are you listening? As someone said, Elizabeth Warren can't go to Iowa and talk about the Electoral College because the reason we go to Iowa is because of the Electoral College. And so that in and of itself is completely out of step with where everyday Americans are. But it feels like they just haven't learned their lesson from 2016. They still refuse to accept that President Trump is the president. They refuse to acknowledge all of the good that has happened since he's become president. And they're not only hanging tight to their leftist progressive policies, but they're doubling down on them. And they live in this echo chamber where people are telling them that's where the American people want to go. Again, have at it, keep talking. President Trump can't wait to get on that debate stage and show that true line between capitalism and opportunity and socialism and the detrimental effects that would have on all of our lives.
Indeed. What do you make of the rise of the young folks in the House, the young females in the House, very progressive? We've had the Representative Omar controversy. We've had the watered-down denunciation of hate. What do you make of what's going on in the House, and how does that impact the national politics?
Well, I can't recall the last time that we had freshman members of Congress who were really driving the politics in their party. And you see that, again, on the Dem 2020 campaign trail, that they have to answer for each of these positions. And they seem all too happy to, by the way, Green New Deal and others. But I think it is important that we keep the spotlight on this because this doesn't seem to be one person making a one-off comment. This seems to be a cultural shift in the Democrat Party, both philosophically and just on policies. And it's very out of step. It's left a lot of us scratching our heads and saying, wait a minute, these used to be apolitical issues, and now this is really something that there's a divide on. But I tell you where the real concern is if I'm a Democrat right now. A big reason that they got their majority in the House is because they ran seemingly moderate members who went into districts that President Trump won in 2016 and campaigned on being people that would work with the president and work to continue to fight for their constituents to make good news happen. And thus far, they have had very little opportunity to do that because the narrative has been so dominated by the far left progressives, both in Congress and those on the campaign trail. And so don't think that we're not paying attention to that has impacted their ability to make good on their own campaign processes to their constituents. And those are districts that we are, well, everyone's paying attention to the presidential reelect, which of course we are as well. But we're also walking and chewing gum and we're looking at these congressional House seats where all of these members who have had to cow to the AOCs of the world who live in far left districts. And these members are now sitting out there with really bad voting records and a lot of broken promises to their constituents. That's going to be the effect on the Democrats in 2020. And their majority is absolutely in peril and in play for Republicans.
Our great friend Cassie Smedley joining us from the RNC. Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Okay, let's get to the usual suspects. We don't know when the former vice president's going to jump in. We've got Beto apologizing for white privilege, apologizing for an innocuous comment about his wife. Just how crazy and zany will the politically correct Politburo reign when we're talking about the Democratic presidential primary, Casey? Okay.
That's right. Well, it's interesting that the Democrat Party, which we know has become the party devoid of free thought. They don't like anybody who disagrees with them. We see that in our classrooms and even a lot of times just in our neighborhoods. And now within their own party and in this primary process, they're going to start clamping down on each other. And the PC police are out in full force, but on each other. And I think that's going to get real old real fast for the candidates themselves, but for voters, because that was one reason that some Democrats did, that the American people embraced President Trump. Because he came out, he was a tell it like it is. He doesn't apologize. He says, this is who I am. But I guarantee that you don't have to like how I talk. You know, I'm from Queens. You're from Kansas City, where I'm from. And he says, but I guarantee I'm always going to fight for you. And everything I do every single day is going to be with you in mind and what we can do to get our country great again. And then you've got Democrats who have had so much of their time on the campaign trail distracted by, as you talk about, Beto makes a comment about his wife being the primary parent. And all these people are saying, you must apologize for that, and he does. And you've got any number of issues go down the line for each of them. I think that's just going to be really tough for not just for them to keep up with, but for voters. We're saying, all right, get to me on the issues. I'm done hearing your apology tour. I want to hear about your issues. And speaking of Beto, that's the biggest thing going against him right now is that he seems devoid of any position. And he's going out there. And it's true. They're asking
You're right.
what is his favorite rock band? And yet when they say, all right, let's talk now about immigration, he says, oh, that's a conversation I'd like to have. And that seems to be his response to any substantive question. And by the way, the media just play right into it. They treat him like he's a member of the Beatles, not a 2020 candidate.
Yeah, see, as someone who, again, is our truth detector when it comes to the press, what do you make of the story concerning Beto where Reuters held off on a story concerning him being a part of a hacking club, and they held off. They had this during the Senate race in Texas. They held off on him writing stories as a young person wanting to run over children. I couldn't see anybody giving anybody a break if they're a Republican. And quite frankly, what does it say about journalism? Reuters is a pretty big organization.
That's right. And so, of course, Beto narrowly lost that race to Ted Cruz, came closer than any Democrat has in a long time. And so the thought is, had this come out, in which case they never would have hesitated to put that out, had it been Ted Cruz, the table's been turned, and would that have done for the race? But I think it's telling that Beto O'Rourke lost that race anyway. Right now, as a presidential contender, his greatest accomplishment is that he lost a Senate race. And that is very telling, though, just how out of touch he was with Texans. But Reuters can sort of say, oh, we'll throw this out now early on in the race, and maybe people will forget about it, but they won't. That's one of our jobs at the RNC, is to make sure they don't, because these are things that he should have to answer for. And by the way, again, back to that question, the press is not asking him tough questions. If you read those stories, they were when he was younger, but he was from a hacking group, had some psychedelic name, which people who know anything about these hacking groups in the 80s and 90s, which I believe people were saying Steve Jobs was a part of. This is not just some kids hanging out in their parents' basement messing around. These are guys who are really getting into some stuff. And my understanding is it's because it was before people really knew this was happening. So, but people are saying, what happened here? Were any laws broken? What does this say about your position on privacy for people? And people aren't asking him those questions. I think it's completely relevant. I don't know what happened to presidential candidates of all candidates. Your entire life is an open book, and people go hard on you for every little minute piece of it. And yet Beto O'Rourke seems to literally skate by on his skateboard. And it's a weird double standard how far the press will go to protect their anointed darling, which he seems to be right now.
Cassie, we sure appreciate you, and thank you very much for joining us here in Idaho.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Be well.
You too. Bye-bye. Our friend Cassie Smedley joining us. You're listening to Kevin Miller. Our time is 6:18, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Let's go to R&R. Good morning, R&R.
Hey, good morning, Kevin. Well, a couple things. So the Marconi Award and Broadcasting and Excellence, inspired by Papa John's cheeseburger pizza and some beautiful dachshunds. But I can tell your game is on. That's amazing. It's good to hear your voice, and I
welcome
really
back.
Appreciate how you've brought the verbiage to the airways, and so many else have too, the socialism instead of, I know you call them the libs, but we definitely have to fight the truth of socialism. I wanted to speak accolades and truth about our president-in-chief and amazing job that he takes every day of all the backbiting and the naysayers and the evil doers that would try and sabotage him and the work at our border. I'm certain, and the things I am able to gather without being down there, that as we're talking and living up here, there's barrier being put on the ground and hardscape, and the actual fence wall barrier being completed, and they're eking out the money however it comes in. I just hope maybe you can talk to Eric Trump sometime, and just every time I hear that his words from about a year ago that he'll be there, I would love to see President Trump come up here. Maybe take a ride on your stagecoach.
For the Snake River Stampede. R&R, thank you, sir.
You're welcome, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We continue on. Kevin Miller with you here, KIDO Talk Radio. Let's go to Pete in Mountain Home. Good morning, Pete.
Kevin, I had a kind of an interesting thought about Beto O'Rourke, okay?
Sure.
I believe his name is Robert O'Rourke. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And he is Irish?
Yeah. Sure.
Isn't he committing cultural misappropriation by calling himself Beto?
Yeah, I guess his birth name is Robert.
Yeah, does he go around to, like Halloween parties dressed in a mariachi costume? Shouldn't the left-wing media be accusing him of cultural misappropriation?
Well, they have identified him as a white male.
Yeah, so he is not Hispanic. So this is cultural misappropriation by him. It's almost like wearing blackface. The guy is obviously he's racist. He's insensitive. He's trying to steal a heritage that is not his.
Calling out the Beto.
Yeah, let's get excited over this. I want to see the media go berserk over this. Right.
Well, that would be refreshing if they went berserk over anything, really.
Yeah, well, any left winger anyway. Yeah.
Well, how do we stop them?
Well, other than just getting the truth out to everybody you know, and your program and your radio station, KIDO 580 AM 107.5 FM.
My man.
Really, really good job of it. And it just, it's how's that go? If the left didn't have low standards, they wouldn't have any. The hypocrisy is it's incredible.
Right.
So just, other than, I don't know, because the way they manage to hog or to stifle social media, Facebook and the others, the way they manage to censor people.
Well, here's my favorite. We live in the most prosperous times, I think, rivaling that of the end of World War II before the Korean War. And yet you have young people today, millennials, Generation Zers, and others saying, this is the most stressful time to live in.
Oh, and
I
they only
can't
have 11
take
and a
the
half
stress.
years. The world will end in 11 and a half years now, according to Occasional Cortex. I mean, come on.
Well, that is a great point when you think about, and now you have Democrats on the campaign trail repeating that propaganda that the world is ending in 12 years.
But they're going to save us. All we have to do is turn over our entire freedom to them, and they will save us.
Well, here you have it. 3 in 5 millennials say life more stressful now than ever before.
Oh, the poor little snowflakers. And these are people living at their parents' home, usually not working and enjoying the money that their parents make. I guess that's why they like socialism. They're used to it.
Well, and here you go from Wikipedia. Robert Francis O'Rourke was born on September 26, 1972 in El Paso, Texas, to Pat Francis O'Rourke and Melissa Martha O'Rourke. He has an Irish and Welsh ancestry. In his infancy, his family gave him the nickname Beto, a common Spanish nickname for first names ending in Berto, initially to distinguish him from his grandfather.
So he is culturally misappropriating.
He's an Irishman.
His entire family is culturally misappropriating. We need to shut this down.
It's time to call Conor McGregor. Yeah.
I am outraged.
Well, that's what we like. Wake up to the outrage.
You betcha. Go for it, man.
Pete, you take care.
You too, Kevin. Thank you.
Thank you. Phone numbers 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Coming up, the zany, wacky legislature. Oh, they're up to no good. How about a vaping tax? And the House almost unanimously says we're down with the hemp. Why they're wrong on both counts. Next with Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Oh, my goodness. Kevin Miller in the morning at KIDO Talk Radio. Phone numbers 580-5436. Our time is 6:26. Thanks for waking up on the right side. Speaking of which, let's get you to work safely and on time.
Channel 7's are recovered.
And I'm Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Let's get to a couple issues. So the state legislature, by Representative Gannon of Boise, has introduced a bill that would provide a 15% sales tax on the hemp. That's right, on the hemp. So no, not hemp. It's so funny. Sometimes I catch myself multitasking, and I don't pay attention. So it's a 15% tax on vaping. And plus, I'm so fixated on hemp. I've got a letter here from the Idaho Prosecuting Attorneys Association saying that the passage of hemp is wrong, and we're going to get to that. But let's handle one story at a time. Don't you hate that when somebody tries to do too much? Let's just focus on the spoken word, so I apologize. So Representative Gannon of Boise has introduced legislation that will be debated in a House committee considering a 15% tax on vaping. This story available at KIDOTalkRadio.com. He calls vaping a big challenge. Many people are very critical of vaping. They say that it's an introduction to tobacco. It's an introduction to, smoking, and there's a tax on nicotine. There needs to be a tax on vaping. We'll talk about it next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Maggie.
Good morning, Kevin.
And still wondering whether or not the repeal of the grocery tax will be brought up. We can bring up a way to tax vaping, but not even discuss repealing the grocery tax. Here's what gets me. We have a young person who listens to the program, and tell me what you think about this one. My wife and family of two spend $400 per month on groceries. That's $288 of the 6% tax. The grocery tax credit for my family is $240. That means we pay $48 per year in this tax. That's 92 cents per week. Please use your voice for greater issues. And this is by a young man by the name of Stuart. Stuart, we appreciate that. And by the way, maybe I'm wrong. But I don't think that I am. I think this is a moment when this is not just about me. It is about you. And it is about a promise that was made by Idaho politicians during the campaign season that they haven't lived up to, right? They haven't lived up to. We'll get back to that. Plus the tax on vaping, plus the vote on hemp, and why law enforcement and Kevin Miller is right, and the people that voted for hemp are wrong. But first, KIDO Talk Radio, your proud home for Fox News on the radio. We go live to London. Simon Owen joins us now. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning, Kevin.
So, the New Zealand terror attacks, the investigation continues. What's the latest, sir?
Well, we think that FBI staff are actually now involved in helping with the police inquiry in New Zealand. Not an unusual situation when you've got a major case like this. Colleagues from Australia have also travelled over, apparently, trying to work out, for one thing, whether the suspected gunman in this attack was acting alone. Certainly only one person has been charged, but the authorities have said it may be that the shooter had help. Now, the New Zealand Prime Minister has also been speaking in the past few hours. A special session of her country's parliament was convened. This is Jacinda Ardern. She is one of the world's youngest heads of government, only been in power for about 17 months. And she has said to Parliament today that the gunman will face the full force of New Zealand law, despite the fact that the suspect in custody is Australian. And she's also been talking about how she plans to deal with the accused attacker's apparent desire for notoriety. There was a claim of responsibility posted online before the attacks. It was previewed on Twitter. It was broadcast live on Facebook through what looked like helmet camera live streaming footage. Well, Jacinda Ardern has said that her approach to this is that she says she will never say the suspect's name. She said, quote, "He sought many things from his act of terror, but one was notoriety. That is why you will never hear me mention his name."
It is interesting how people are covering this. And, of course, gun owners in New Zealand are worried their guns are going to be taken away. How unusual is it that you would have a terror attack in New Zealand or any attack when we're talking about weapons? Is it a violent country? Do we know, Simon?
No, it's not. And I mean, this was unprecedented beyond belief. And so, the Prime Minister has found herself, as I say, she's an interesting case study in that she is so young and so new to this. And now she's finding that she's the leader who has to try and voice the grief of a nation that has, I think, for many people, they would say they've been rocked by this because nothing on this scale has ever happened before in New Zealand. And at the same time, the response that the government appears to be taking there, it does look like it's going to crack down on gun ownership. And gun laws in New Zealand, they're kind of layered. They're not as relaxed as in the US, but they are more relaxed than many other countries. Most guns don't have to be registered, for instance, in New Zealand. Not many countries still take that position. And Jacinda Ardern has said that she supports a ban on semi-automatic weapons after this shooting. So she's gone very quickly to her cabinet. She says that they have already given their approval in principle to change gun laws, and she says they will be announced by next Monday. And she is moving very quickly on that. There's not been much time for a sort of taking stock and debating it, but she's looking to the West and to Australia and to a precedent really that was set down there, because Australia has some of the tightest gun laws in the world, and they were enacted very quickly after a massacre in 1996. And Jacinda Ardern has even referred to that. You know, she said that the Australians took 12 days after that mass shooting to line up their new super strict gun laws, and she says she wants to have New Zealand's own enhanced gun laws in place within 10 days of this attack. So that is next Monday.
Indeed. Simon, we appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. Simon Owen joining us live from London. Phone numbers here, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Kevin Miller on 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio. So, is the media out to get President Trump? We have talked about this for quite some time. We have said this again and again and again, but the idea of the media out to get President Trump, Ted Koppel was asked about this by Marvin Kalb. You know both of them, both distinguished newsmen. Let's hear what they had to say.
I'm terribly concerned that when you talk about the New York Times these days, when you talk about the Washington Post these days, we're not talking about the New York Times of 50 years ago. We are not talking about the Washington Post of 50 years ago. We're talking about organizations that I believe have, in fact, decided as organizations that Donald J. Trump is bad for the United States. We have things appearing on the front page of the New York Times right now that never would have appeared 50 years ago. Analysis, commentary on the front page.
There we have it from Ted Koppel from our friends at Newsbusters. By the way, Ted Koppel is not a conservative. Ted Koppel, the host of Nightline. Ted Koppel, the man that took down so many conservatives. Ted Koppel prides himself on being a newsman. One more time. Ted.
I'm terribly concerned that when you talk about the New York Times these days, when you talk about the Washington Post these days, we're not talking about the New York Times of 50 years ago. We are not talking about the Washington Post of 50 years ago. We're talking about organizations that I believe have, in fact, decided as organizations that Donald J. Trump is bad for the United States.
There we have it from Ted Koppel. Folks, this is what we are up against. This is the power of the national elite, the press, led by their acolytes in the Democratic Party, their ne'er-do-wells, their gadflies, essentially saying that Donald Trump is bad for America. And by the way, this is from one of their own. And what amazes me about this is that Ted Koppel's one of them. And that in America, you're supposed to elect your representatives and you're supposed to let them do their jobs. There's no place in the Constitution for electing an unelectable press and deciding who is and who isn't fit to run the country. You know, I was sitting there watching CNN the other night from a young lady that wasn't born during Watergate, probably born in the mid-'80s, if that. And part of not being old, and we never give old people enough credit, is you have a frame of reference. You have a sense of history. You have life experience. You remember Watergate. I was a little boy. I was a little boy during Watergate. And when we talk about the country, and they kept calling him Nixon, you know, this is and if we can achieve one thing in our time here together, if it lasts for a long time, or if it ends tomorrow, or if it ends today, is the ability to call these people out and to say his name is former President Richard Nixon, Richard Milhouse Nixon. And then you had people saying, well, Nixon, how is he? Is he worse than Trump? There's no respect for the office. Now, if that were the same when they went to old Obama, that'd be one thing. But old Obama is called President Obama. No, you are a former President Obama. And you notice none of them call him Obama. But they sure do call Trump Trump, just like they did with Bush. Just the subtle, yet so effective disrespect of the office of the presidency at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. We have alerted you that the coup is underway. And say, Kevin Miller, what can I do? Well, we can voice our opinions. We can tell our lawmakers that ain't playing here in Idaho. And we can make a difference. And this is where, you take a look at a couple things. Whether or not we should start a sin tax in the state of Idaho. Quite frankly, you take a look at, and I hate to say it, the Tea Party Bob was right when it comes down to the state of the economy. It's booming right now, but where is the accountability for the $60 million government shortfall? And maybe, by the way, I just need to step up our game a little, and I need to take House Majority Leader Mike Moyle's offer that he said he would come on this program. I've run into him a couple times. I've seen him plow in the fields. He is the ultimate deal maker. In my opinion, it is not Scott Betke. It is Mike Moyle. The Senate, I don't know what goes on in the Idaho Senate. But I think that Mike Moyle runs that show. Mike Moyle coming up with this bill that I believe passed the House. If it didn't, it should. Requiring a vote on urban renewal funds used for pet projects. Mayor Beater is upset about it because it cuts off his path to the piggy bank in Boise. But I go back to this, and I go back to Mike Moyle. Maybe we should have just come on and say, Representative Moyle, number one, what's the deal? What's the skinny on the repeal of the grocery tax? He told us on the Tommy Ahlquist podcast, Inspire Excellence, brought to you by Ball Ventures Ahlquist. He did disclose that. Said it wasn't going to happen. Matt Erpelding, minority leader, on the same podcast, said it's not going to happen. But on one hand, we can, which amazes me, we can have a provision that taxes vaping, at least make its way to committee, at least get printed, and that cover story, and that's the cover story of KIDOTalkRadio.com, a 15% tax on vaping because vaping is bad. Now, if it were just me out there, you could say, oh, that's Kevin Miller, the right-wing extremist wanting to lower taxes. But every politician, was there not a politician that ran for office that did not promise repealing the grocery tax? That is number one. Number two, the situation of funding the state government. I know it's not as sexy as everything else, but there was a $60 million shortfall. Then you have the looming expense of Medicaid expansion. Maybe it's time to pass a sin tax on vaping, on fatty foods, on sugary foods, on everything else. It's kind of like the smoking tax. Hey, smoking's bad. We're going to use the tax on smoking to fund the programs to tell you not to smoke. But we depend on the revenues from you smoking to fund the ads to tell you not to smoke. It doesn't make sense. But if it brings in more money, who cares? I don't see anybody addressing these issues. I don't see the vaunted Idaho Press Club pressing these people. I see them having their lattes and elevating their own sense of self-importance. And look, journalism has to be able to take it as well as give it. So many times these journalists, they dish it out, but they can't take it. Where is somebody asking the governor on the powder puff interviews that he gets? Apparently, he only appears on Channel 6. And we've talked to the people that know the press secretary. We still haven't heard from them, which is fine. This is not the governor's show. This is the people's show. Why isn't somebody asking the governor, where's the repeal of the grocery tax? How are you going to fund Medicaid expansion? And he can say, look, that's the legislator's problem. Okay, what's the plan? Well, they're working their way through committees. Well, there's going to be a work requirement. This is an economic bombshell that could hit us. Right now, times are good. But shouldn't we be planning? It's kind of like IBM. IBM did not see the PC revolution coming. They let Microsoft license the software to every other Tom, Dick, and Harry PC operator. They let Intel sell their chips to everywhere else, and boom, what do you know? 5 years, IBM was making $4.5 billion on personal computers. 3 years later, they were almost literally out of business. And again, this is the best state to live in. People want to move here, but we better be looking out for the future. And we just had a gubernatorial primary that was supposed to determine the future. Now, maybe I'm missing something, and that's where you join the conversation at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Hank in Boise, you're next. First, you're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM, your home for Hannity. Oh, Ray Amaya, when you start the day with the Cars, it's going to be a good one. Waking up on the right side, Kevin Miller. Reminding you, Dave Ramsey today, noon to 3. He'll teach you how to spend less and save more. Save more and spend less. Our great friend Dave Ramsey. Phone number's here, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Wondering if anybody's dealing with the legislative bombshell about Medicaid expansion. Yes, they're looking at the work requirements. Yes, we're looking at a 15% tax on the vaping. But where's the repeal of the grocery tax? Let's get to your calls. Hank in Boise with Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Hank.
Good morning. Describe the press nowadays. It's basically people who, bias doesn't adequately describe it. It's basically Democrat partisans who are basically liberal activists, and they use the media to promote a liberal agenda. But as far as Ted Koppel's remarks, I think Ted's memory is beginning to fail him. Maybe Alzheimer's set in. I remember the era back with Nixon, when Nixon got just about as much negative coverage, and I remember the snickering of the members of the press, Tricky Dick, and I remember Nixon used his spy president Spiro Agnew to basically come out down on the press. The nagging boobs of negativity was which Spiro Agnew attacked him by. The incestuous relationship really begins with the Kennedy administration. When Edward R. Murrow was brought into the administration, they would have these cocktail dinners, and George Washington with James Reston of the New York Times, and the key members of the press and the Washington establishment would plot strategy, policy strategy, and coordination of the news at these Georgetown cocktail dinners. People like the right now, I can't think of the names at the moment. Basically, so this has been going on for a long time. The bitterness, I think it's because Trump has gotten under their skin that they even have heightened the viciousness of their attack. But as far as this being a golden age and whatnot, the publication of the Pentagon Papers was a deliberate attempt by the New York Times to undermine Nixon's Vietnam
Right, but
policy.
what do you make of Ted Koppel that we just played on KIDO Talk Radio saying they're out to get him?
Well, he's just stating an obvious truth, but I don't think but Koppel should look at himself in the mirror. Look at he goes after conservatives. Like look at the job he tried to pull on Sean Hannity.
Sure.
That was as dirty as it gets, and so I mean he's not in a position to be judging his fellow colleagues because he's just as bad as the rest of them. He wants to set himself up as some sort of wise sage of the thing, and his behavior in the past is just as bad as the rest of them. So I can't say he's in a.
All right, Hank. Thank you. I got to go.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. KIDO Talk Radio, traffic and weather together. Good morning, Dave.